It's Lillian Rose, the academic pinner, and welcome to this week's vlog, a mental health minute covering the topic of grief. The Mental Health Minute is a recurring vlog segment where we take 1 minute for an open, honest and frank discussion about mental health and mental well-being. So without further ado, let's get to it and let's talk about the topic of grief. Before we begin this Mental Health Minute, given the sensitive nature of the topic of grief, I'd like to take a couple of seconds to remind you all that the Mental Health Minute is about knowledge, not advice or mental health assistance. If you believe that you are struggling with grief beyond the normal bounds of grief and its processes, then I urge you to speak to a mental health professional. I have provided some links below, but again I must stress that this is not psychological advice and is simply for knowledge sharing purposes only. If you think that the topic of grief and the discussion of grief may upset you, then I invite you to close the video now. As always, please take care of yourself. Recently I returned home early from my European vacation due to the unexpected death of a close family member. Upon returning home, I both witnessed and experienced many acts and versions of grief, which sometimes confused, bewildered, puzzled or upset not only other family members but the individual grieving. These acts and versions and experiences of grief have been the inspiration for this particular mental health minute, and I believe that if we talk about the process of grief and what this means for us individually and collectively is important for our psychological well-being and for adapting to life after the loss of a significant loved one. Probably the most well-known grief model is the Kubler-Ross model of grief, which was actually initially developed in the 1980s to describe the anticipatory grief of the dying. According to the Kubler-Ross model of grief, an individual must pass through 5 stages of grief before completing the bereavement process and gaining closure. Subsequent research, however, has contributed to a contemporary understanding of grief as an idiosyncratic, diverse and interconnected process which transcends normative stages. Grief is now believed to vary in both intensity and duration depending on mitigating factors such as the griever's relationship with the deceased's manner of death, and the griever's attachment style overall. One contemporary grief theory is the dual process model of grief, which defines grief as a transference between emotion-based and problem-based coping. Essentially, a griever moves between periods of emotional exploration and expression and the completion of external tasks. Grief is not seen as something to be completed or resolved, but rather something that becomes better integrated into ongoing life. This is one contemporary theory that I identify with quite strongly as someone who was urgently called home from across the other side of the world, right into the middle of funeral service preparations. Provided the death of the deceased is not untimely, violent or unexpected, grievers can regain their psychological equilibrium within months of mourning, with some studies finding grief intensity to be low roughly 6 months after the death of a loved one. Psychological intervention into the natural grieving process is considered something to be avoided if at all possible, and is really only engaged in if grief is complicated, prolonged, or interfering in the social or occupational functioning of the griever. Thanks for joining me for yet another Mental Health Minute. I hope that this short vlog added to your mental health knowledge and well-being. As always, if you like what you see, don't forget to hit subscribe below so you can see all of my upcoming vlogs. You can also catch my daily adventures on my Facebook and Instagram page through the links I've provided below. Until next time.